world bows down to power and might, when deception fills the air, when the beast demands our worship, Lord, we know that you are there. The dragon roars, the false prophets call, but we will not be moved. Our names are written in your book, by the Lamb's own blood we're proved. We stand firm in the storm, though the world may fall away. Our God is on the throne, and His truth will light the way. Let the nations rage around us, let them worship what is false. We belong to Christ the Lamb, He's our refuge and our strong tower. "42 months of testing come, but you limit evil's reign. What seems like defeat to mortal lies is part of your perfect plan. The mark may come, the pressure mount, to deny your holy name, but we would rather lose this world than forfeit eternal gain. Let the nations rage around us, let them worship what is false. We belong to Christ the Lamb, He's our refuge and our strong tower. Patient endurance, faithful hearts, this is our calling now. Not by sword or earthly power, but surrendered to your vow. You who were slain before the world have conquered death and hell. Every knee will bow at last to the one who loved us well. We stand firm in the storm, let the beast demand our worship. We will never bow our knee. We belong to Christ the Lamb, and in Him we shall be Wisdom comes from God alone, understanding from above.
Welcome, friends. Man, it is good to have you here. I'm excited, stoked about today's conversation. Well, if you were with us in the last live Q&A, you probably already saw there's merch. Go get you some. There's a hat. There's a shirt. There's a mug. There's all kinds of fun stuff. So excited to have you here. If you enjoyed the song that you heard at the very beginning of the episode, which there will be more and more and more of those. Well, first off, the members of the channel get first dibs and access to those videos, which are actually audios. Okay. So those are, I'm working on kind of generating songs. Yes, they are AI generated, but they are lyrics based on scripture. There's only one right now that is actually available to the public. Everything else is available for members. They will slowly get released to the public. So if you're patient, you'll get them. But if you want access to them quickly, we've got some that are on Psalms. In fact, today's video that was the music entrance is based on today's conversation, Revelation 13. So, and it's powerful. Like every time I listen to it, it's like, man, this is so good. It's a great way to hear the word of God and kind of listen to what it is that the text is trying to convey. So today's opening song was on Revelation 13. Now, as I usually do, there's a couple of things I want to mention before we get started, and then we're going to jump straight in. By the way, I want to welcome our most recent member. Welcome to the team. Thank you so much for being a part of the community. Excited to have you. Grateful that you're here. So glad you're with us. And then the other thing I want to mention, which I'm really excited about, I haven't yet shown this to you all, but I generally I show people kind of books at the beginning of some of these things, and I haven't yet showed this one. This actually was given to me from I consider them my godparents, my second parents, my whatever parents. Okay. Incredible family from Haiti. He actually was an Adventist for quite some time, taught at the academic level. I'll leave their story up to their own story. Still study with them, love them deeply. Witnessed a miracle over him when he had to go to emergency surgery. That's a whole nother conversation. Literally a miracle. The physician that came in said, there is no way that I did this. It was the hands of someone else while this was happening. And incredible. The guy had open heart surgery, and just was what was not supposed to happen happened. And that was complete restoration of his heart, which is incredible. So I'm not going to give away the name because it is what it is. But if they're watching, they're going to know they gave this to me. And I'm so excited because this will come in handy when I get into my original language study with my master's class. So if you have done any work with original language, you know that this is some of the core Biblia Hebraica. Stuttgartensia is just an incredible resource. Okay. But you kind of have to know the original language because, well, it's in the original language. This is the Hebrew Bible. I have this in the Logos version. I've used it in Logos. But I'm excited to be able to use this in my studies as I get into both the Greek and the Hebrew with regards to original language work. So I wanted to make you aware of that. This is just an incredible find. It was given to me from my good friend, and I'm going to leave the name out. Okay. So appreciate that and looking forward to using that soon. Couple of things as we jump in. This is episode 40. Can you believe that? Episode 40 of the Revelation series. So excited to dive in with you all today. One thing that I do want to mention, by the way, no, I don't currently know. I'm not fluent in Koine Greek or Hebrew yet. Okay. But I am currently getting my THM through Dallas Theological Seminary. That is a mini PhD, and then we'll move on to get my PhD. In that THM program, they require 5 semesters of Greek. That means that by the end of those 5 semesters, you are exegeting in the original Greek language. And then they require 4 semesters. Did I say episodes? 5 semesters of Greek, 4 semesters of Hebrew, of which you will be able to exegete in both of those languages fluently. So that is coming down the pipeline. I begin my Greek work it's, I believe, the last semester of this year. So pray for me. But we do get into the original language, as we always do in this pretty much every time we go on, because we utilize Logos so heavily. So excited to be here. Today we're getting into Revelation 13. It has been a long journey, but before we do that, I need to make another quick announcement. I'm so excited for the next interview. I'm gonna let everyone know kind of what the workout is for the next few weeks. Okay, mark your calendars for January 27. Why? Because we are going to have a first ever on the show, January 27. We are going to have Anthony Delgado. If you have not picked his book up, you absolutely should. Okay. It's called The Gospel is Bigger Than You Think. There is a subtitle on it. We are going to be getting into all the little crazy things. You see the figures behind, like all the little crazy stuff. But at the heart of this book is the gospel. So we're going to be digging in to the gospel, and that's going to branch us into some conversations about, like Genesis 6 and maybe even Psalms 82 and maybe some other stuff. Who knows where it'll go? He has several other books out. The guy is well thought of. So go check him out. Excited to have Anthony on. He is a part of the Divine Council Facebook group. He's been interviewed by multiple other podcasters. Excited to have him on. I'm really, really, really stoked for this conversation. Now, besides that, okay, I will let you know that we are filling up, okay? We have the following week on a Wednesday, we will have Dr. Clinton Baldwin on, who has a PhD in multiple things. Very, very well thought of. He's got a recent book that he's published specifically on dealing with the erroneous teaching of the Adventist Church in the investigative judgment. We are going to talk to him in great depth about some of the nuances of that doctrine, especially as it relates to the Daniel series that we've been doing and how that touches some other things. So you're not going to want to miss that. Now, the following week, this gets us into the second week of February. We have Dr. Drew Johnson invited back on the show. I need you to pray that it doesn't snow him in next time. So that will actually be that will be the conversation with this book. Okay, that will be this book here that we were supposed to have last week. Was it this week? It's been a hot minute. But wasn't able to. After that, I don't have this scheduled yet, okay? But it is being worked out as we speak. We will actually have Dr. Jerry Gladson on to work through this particular book. This is his most recent, fresh off the press book, The Introduction to the Five Scrolls. 400 to 500. I mean, literally 400 to 500. I think it's 500 pages that deal with these five scrolls. So really excited to have Dr. Jerry Gladson, on the show. So excited. All right. Well, let's dive into the conversation today. And as we always do, I am going to kick us off with a word of prayer initially, and then we will dive right in. Okay, let's bow our heads and have a word of prayer as we get started. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would just calm our thoughts. I know that a lot of people are going through a lot of things right now. We have winter weather coming in. We have concerns. We have family members that we're maybe thinking about. We have finances. We have lots of stuff maybe that are rumbling around in our lives. And I just pray that you would send your Holy Spirit to calm us, to make us be present, to help us to learn what it is that you want us to learn in this moment as we engage in this beautiful book that you gave to John called Revelation, the revealing of Christ. I'm excited about chapter 13, and I pray that you would just open our hearts, open our thoughts, most importantly, that you would transform us, help us to become more like Jesus Christ. Thank you for sending your Son. Thank you for the gift of salvation. I accept that gift, and I want to honor it by reflecting you in all I do, say, and think. We pray these things in your precious name. Amen. All right, let's get started. Let's jump into this fun chapter. This is getting good, okay? This is one of those chapters, and we're going to read the entire chapter together today, okay? This is one of those chapters in Revelation where there is going to be some very clear and obvious connections back into the Old Testament. Now, remember, if you're newer here, this conversation in Revelation is all about looking at John's apocalypse through the lens of the Old Testament. That's what we're trying to do, okay? We're trying to find those connections, and we see a lot of them in this particular chapter, okay? There's going to be some very obvious ones. Now, there will be some items that we go through, and these are the ones we like to hit on, that are probably not so obvious, okay? So as we always do when we get into this, we're going to be sticking very, very, very closely with the Old Testament as the backdrop of what we're doing. And I can sort of, as we're getting into this, I'll sort of telegraph, or at least kind of express in the beginning, where we're going to be headed in this conversation as far as the beasts, because we get into the whole beast language. There's two of them actually in this particular chapter. There's a ton of Old Testament, what I would call maybe antecedent material that could factor into this particular topic. When we get to that point, I'm going to mention a few, or sort of a couple of different, maybe what I would call trajectories, places that you could go. Now, remember, I really don't, the way we do this here is I'm not trying to convince you of my position, and I'm not necessarily trying to tell you what you have to believe about it. I'm simply giving you the trajectories, the things that you hopefully will take and further study, okay? Here's the reality of this chapter. Some of these trajectories that we're going to get on, okay? Many of them are speculative, many of them. So just, you know how we engage in this kind of stuff, even though I'm going to tell you, like, some of these trajectories are going to be a little bit more, maybe better, more academically supported. But at the end of the day, many of these trajectories are going to have some level of speculation involved in them, because this just is a fun chapter, and there just is, it is what it is, okay? So as we jump into this, I want to read the entire chapter, beginning to end. Let me get this on the screen real quick, and we're going to do it in a little bit different manner. Let's see here. Okay, let's get in. Now I'm in the NRSV updated edition. Okay, New Revised Standard Edition, the updated edition. One thing I would suggest, if you haven't yet, I really would suggest that you listen to Revelation being read to you, okay? That you audibly, instead of having to read it, that you listen to it. I was hoping to get that as something we could do today, but, well, Something didn't come in the mail that would have helped that. So there's that. We'll do it next time. Here we go in chapter 13. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave it its power and its throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its fatal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against him or against it?" The beast was given a mouth speaking arrogant and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to speak blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to wage war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you have to be taken captive, into captivity you go. If you kill with the sword you must be killed. Here is the call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all. And by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also, it caused all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be given a brand on the right hand or the forehead. Know that so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the brand, that is, the name of the beast or the number for its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number for a person. Its number is 666. That is the reading of God's word, Revelation chapter 13. Now, since we are focusing on Old Testament stuff here, we're not really going to get into too much interpretation, okay? We're not going to do a lot of interpreting all the ins and outs. And again, I'm going to share some of my thoughts on the interpretation side that might interest you. But remember, we're not so concerned with the interpretation. We're trying to draw on the Old Testament antecedents, the Old Testament backdrop, okay? I think the most fruitful trajectories when we get into this, okay, is to really contextualize the content that we're reading. The most obvious things that we can deal with is having to do with the beast. Now, everyone, when we get into this, If I was in a Zoom call, okay, I would be like, put a 1 in the chat, put a 2 in the chat. I'm certain that every single one of us here have been told some sort of the beast is this, is that, this is that, this is going to happen. The number means this. There's all kinds of things that pop up. Okay. But with regards to the two beasts, okay, there are really, like I said, there's two kind of interpretive trajectories that people are going to take that are possibilities with respect to contextualizing the beasts with the Old Testament. Not with the modern, it's a tank or it's a this or it's this person or that thing or whatever it is. Okay. You'll see a lot of that junk out there. But we're concerned about contextualizing it in the Old Testament. Now, one of these is going to be pretty obvious. The other one, not so obvious, and potentially I'd be surprised if most of you may not have heard the not so obvious one, okay? And I'm going to go through both of them. Honestly, I don't really feel compelled to only go with one, okay? The more obvious one or the less obvious one, okay? I think that they're actually both in play as we get into this. Because the more obvious of the two is, of course, surprise, surprise, what's going on in Daniel 7. So this inevitably is the most common trajectory that people move into. Now, I'm going to read Daniel 7 because we just got done with Revelation 13. This is the more common response that, hey, this is what it's connected to. So let's read Daniel 7 real quick. I'm doing this because I'm hoping that you're going to see, while there are some connections, some of those connections maybe aren't quite what's in view. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so let's read Daniel 7. In the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream. I, Daniel, saw in my vision by night the four winds of heaven stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts come up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then, as I watched, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a human being. And a human mind was given to it. Another beast appeared, a second one, that looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side, had 3 tusks in its mouth among its teeth, and was told, arise, devour many bodies. After this, as I watched, another appeared, like a leopard. The beast had 4 wings of a bird on its back and 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this, I saw in the visions by night a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth and was devouring, breaking in pieces and stamping what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that preceded it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns when another horn appeared, a little one, that came up among them. 3 of the original horns were plucked up from before it. There were eyes like human eyes in this horn, and a mouth speaking arrogantly. As I watched, thrones were set in place, and an ancient one took his throne. His clothes was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and flowed out from his presence. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood attending him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I watched then because of the noise of the arrogant words that the horn was speaking. And as I watched, the beast was put to death and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. As I watched in the night visions, I saw one like a human being coming from the clouds of heaven. And he came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was troubled within me, and the visions of my head terrified me. I approached one of the attendants to ask him the truth concerning all this. So he said that he would disclose to me the interpretation of the matter. As for these 4 great beasts, 4 kings shall rise out of the earth, but the holy ones of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. Then I desired to know the truth concerning the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And concerning the 10 horns that were on its head, and concerning the other horn that came up, and before which 3 others had fallen, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke arrogantly, and that seemed greater than the others. As I looked, that horn made war with the holy ones and was prevailing over them until the Ancient One came. Then judgment was given for the holy ones of the Most High. And the time arrived when the holy ones gained possession of the kingdom. This is what he said. As for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth that shall be different from all the other kingdoms. It shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and piece it and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. This one shall be different from the former ones and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, shall wear out the holy ones of the Most High, and shall attempt to change the ritual calendar and the law. And they shall be given into his power for a time, 2 times, and a half a time. Then the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and totally destroyed. The kingship and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey them. Here the account ends. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly terrified me, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter in my mind. All right. I wanted to get through those 2 chapters because Daniel 7 is the sort of nondescript final beast, but there are disconnections from that. There's lack of continuity. It doesn't perfectly fit. For instance, in Revelation 13, there is not just one beast. There's 2 beasts. One is from the sea. The other one's from the land. There is some Old Testament precedent for 2 beasts, sea and land. There is some that would have importance here, or maybe relevance is a better way of looking at it, especially if we're looking at what we're going to be paying attention to in Revelation 13 as kind of this Babel chaos concept. Okay, not kind of rebirthing evil, but it's this. I've mentioned this before, but Babel chaos is kind of a concept in the Old Testament that's going to take precedence, I think, in the imagery that's going on. Now, when I use the term chaos, and this is almost perfectly planned, and I didn't intend to plan it this way. Okay, this seems to be kind of the working of God knitting things together. But the interview that we're going to have next week with Anthony Delgado is going to fit perfectly into this whole conversation. Okay, this whole perspective of things. Don't you hate it when you have something that I got something in my eye that's causing me problems? All right. So when I say chaos, what I'm referring to, because of the Old Testament precedent here, what I'm engaging in is chaos is anything that is not Eden. It's what we would call anti-Eden. Specifically, it's what is tied to kind of this, the corruption of the Edenic desire. Okay, which is very clear in the rebellious accounts in the Old Testament. Now, I'm not going to dive into all those rebellious accounts. We know that Israel was very rebellious. We know that there was Adam and Eve that rebelled. We know that there was also the rebellion of Genesis 6. Not going to go into that. There's the Tower of Babel experience. That kind of, those three were kind of the main key, what would be called Jewish concepts of anti-Eden or rebellion. Okay. If you want a really good book on this, whether or not you like this individual or not, I would really encourage you to read it for the research anyways. You should absolutely read the book called Demons, What the Bible Really Says About the Powers of Darkness. This is actually the Logos version. I have the hard copy version as well. But this is really going to give you kind of the research behind kind of where the evil side of things kind of started from a rebellion standpoint. Okay. So that's kind of where I would encourage you to focus if you wanted to get a good topic for the evil aspect, chaos aspect. So when I say chaos, okay, I feel like when I say chaos, you say chaos. That's what went through my head. What I'm referring to when I say chaos, or when I want you to kind of think through, is the loss of paradise, the loss of Eden. Anything that is not Eden, which would resort to anything that's associated with death, disorder, decreation. Okay, you've got Yahweh and creation. You've got chaos and decreation, or the deconstructing of order, where God puts things in order. This anti-Eden kind of motif, it's the destruction of order. Okay. It's the order that God originally instituted in the paradise that was lost. That's the concept that I would encourage you to kind of think through. So death, decay, loss, estrangement from God, fragmentation of humanity, all of that is theologically bundled up into this concept of chaos. And what's at the centerpiece for a Jew? What is at the centerpiece of that concept when I say chaos is the Tower of Babel. Babel is kind of the central point of thought, the most obvious. Obviously, it's considered kind of the third rebellion per se. Okay, that's, most don't see it that way, but in Jewish perspective, it would be considered, it was the most high-handed thing that was done for humanity at large. Okay. And this is going to fragment into obviously things around the sons of God, being assigned to the nations and like other areas of theological motifs that go on. I'm not going to go into those, okay? But just know that all of that is wrapped up into this theology of chaos. Noah in the flood is a whole nother chaos motif. The image, I want you to think about this for a second, okay? The image of God, which was humanity, is placed in a cacophony. It is submerged in the deluge, and it comes out a brand new creature. All of this motif, this concept of, we have to deconstruct. That's what the deluge did, is deconstructed things in order to recreate a new thing. And that is what came out with Noah. That's part of what's in the concept of Noah and the flood. Now, specifically with Noah and the flood, understand that in the biblical account of the flood, we're specifically in the Mesopotamian part of the world. And the imagery that's used in the flood account is oftentimes considered a theological response, or scholars will call it a polemic, that's kind of speaking against or towards, theologically speaking, against the Mesopotamian view of what happened. Okay, and so if you go even further back from the third rebellion, if you go to what's called the first rebellion, there's a good bit of material in Genesis 3 that also connects to, in some way, to Babylon or Babylonian material, Mesopotamian material. Okay, it's not that it's isolated to Babylon, but you're going to get some of this connection. Now, just as a side note, this is just a freebie. I'm not going to even go into the details. Part of what I am saying is why, and this is not a major deal, okay? But I'm reasonably convinced that at least the first 10 chapters, maybe less, maybe just the first few chapters, but the first 10 chapters of Genesis were probably not written by Moses, and they're probably very Mesopotamian. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean good, bad, whatever. Okay. I know it's attributed to Moses, but it doesn't seem like Moses would have been the author. He wouldn't have had knowledge of the culture, the Mesopotamian culture, some of the things that kind of we see in there. But that's just a freebie. It's not a big deal. You can look into that if you desire. Okay. Now, if you loop into this conversation, if you loop in Ezekiel 28, okay, we had some interaction with Ezekiel in some of the shorts and the conversations on YouTube. But if you loop in Ezekiel 28, this is the proclamation against the king of Tyre. Some people immediately say, hey, this is Lucifer. Just hold tight to that, because that's not really what's going on. That's a whole nother conversation. But if you loop in the framework of Ezekiel 28, where Ezekiel is repurposing, what's happening in this section is that Ezekiel is repurposing this supernatural rebellion and the divine council theme. That's what's going on in the kind of the framing of Ezekiel 28, where yes, there's the king of Babylon. There's this entity behind the king of Babylon that's considered the supernatural side. And there is this kind of lamentation about the king of Babylon. And it's dealing with kind of this motif of the divine council, the supernatural realm, all that stuff. Okay. So Ezekiel, now why do I bring that up? Ezekiel is obviously writing his book, the parts that he's writing. Okay. That's a whole nother author conversation from Babylon, which again gets us back into this Babylon, Mesopotamian, trajectory. So there are a number of things that are going on in this kind of part of the text that really connects to all of this kind of chaos. It's really the entire theology around chaos. And it connects us to Babylon, both in terms of historically, okay, the historical reality of the biblical story as it's told, but it's also connecting us geographically from an orientation standpoint. It's connecting us textually to the textual material that's used to tell the story. And then ultimately, we have Babylon becomes kind of the ultimate evil, the ultimate foil for everything that's terrible. This ultimate reversal. Okay, kind of like the exile. Now, why is this important? Hang tight, because we're going to eventually get to Revelation and Babylon's going to be a thing, okay? Before you get to the exile in the Old Testament, before you get to all the exiles, what's in the middle? You have the creation account, you have these 3 rebellions, and then as you look at the narrative, what happens? Well, you have Egypt, right? Egypt plays this big kind of bad role in the narrative. And then after Egypt comes Assyria. And then you get Babylon, if you look at the kind of the narrative or the scope of what's happening. But what's really interesting is how all three of these figures, Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, they're all used as descriptions of chaos terms, okay? Which a number of which are what I would call Babylonish. It's a version of Babylon, even if it's not Babylon itself. Okay, even if it's Egypt or Assyria or something else, it takes on a flavor of Babylon, because Babylon is the ultimate evil, chaos, the ultimate thing. Okay, so there's a lot of interconnections that are going on here. There's a lot of things working through the text. Now, we could get down some of these rabbit holes. I'd love to go down some of these rabbit holes, okay, and discuss lots of the, ferret out the details and all the stuff. We're not going to do that, okay? We might do a couple, okay? But I think this is at least enough flavor of some of the things that are floating in the backdrop of the author that we need to be aware of, that hold pretty big theological motifs. Okay, so if we're looking at Revelation 13, get back to the text. If we're looking at this as a broad, general overlook, as the war, this would be considered, in fact, last episode, I think the last 2 episodes, we called it the cosmic war. It's really the war against chaos is what this is, okay? Or chaos's war against the people of God. And then kind of the plan that God has to restore paradise that's lost. And that's going to open up, just that idea is going to open up the door just a little bit to something that's maybe a little less expected, probably hasn't been talked about, you may not be familiar with, as the backdrop to the 2 beasts. The first one is in Daniel. The first one's in Daniel, and that is Babylon. So Babylon is going to be pretty easy when we go through some of these connections, okay? But the other one is, like I've said already, it's quite unexpected. Now, to get into this conversation, I'm going to jump into a chapter that most people don't discuss with regards to Revelation. Okay. And that is, drum roll, the book of Job. Okay, we're going to get into the book of Job. And by the way, thank you for your thoughts. We love to overthink things here because we are diving very deep into the text. This is not a surface reading. So if that's just not your thing, adios. That's okay. It's all good. Okay. It's all good. We don't do surface stuff here, though, friends. Okay. We want to treat the text as something very special. We want to handle it. We want to go deep. Okay. Yes, Sola Scriptura, Job has land and sea beasts. Why is this so important? Because we are trying to get into the framework of John in Revelation as to why would he be using these things. No, friends, he's not thinking about the papacy. No, friends, he's not thinking about Apache helicopters. No, friends, that is erroneously retarded when it comes to dealing with the text. Okay. He has something in his mind that he is conveying. Yes, Adrian, you're getting to it. Okay. So Job 40, and believe it or not, as you roll through this, Job 40, look at Behemoth. You get this kind of description. If you get into 41, you get Leviathan. You're getting into the conversation. Okay, believe it or not, we actually have the sea beast. Okay. Other places in Scripture, they're not going to be described as Leviathan with clarity like Job 41 does. Okay. But we do see Leviathan is this twisting serpent that is the chaos that basically is known as, in ancient Near East, it's known as the twisted serpent. Okay. And then you have Rahab. Now I mentioned Rahab, okay, which is the land counterpart to Leviathan. So if you're not familiar with this, you're gonna miss a lot of what's going on. A lot. Okay. You actually get Rahab mentioned in the context of kind of chaos in connection to Leviathan in a couple of places. I'm just going to go real quick to Psalm 89. Okay. And why are we doing this? We want to extract the potential mental backdrop that would be in the head and in the mind of John as he's writing about these particular things. Okay. So Psalm 89, for instance, if you just kind of work through the text, let's see. Can you see? Oh yeah, Rahab. There it is. You crushed Rahab like a carcass. Now, I want to show you this. Okay. Let me move to a different screen real quick. You should be able to see the drop down here. You should be able to see here. Now, this is easily tagged. Okay. Rahab, this is tagged as a mythical dragon. Okay. This is not Rahab from Jericho. That's not what's going on. Okay. This is classified at, again, this is the counterpart to Leviathan is what's going on. If we wanted to look at this particular thing, we could actually go to the Dictionary of Deities and Demons, which really, if you're doing good work from a biblical standpoint, you're going to have access to some of this. This is a great time for me to say, if you're new here and you want to geek out on this stuff, join the Discord channel. Okay. Scan the QR code that's often in the upper right-hand corner. It'll be there in just a second. Scan that, or if you're watching, you can come back to it later on. That's fine. That's okay. Get access to the Discord channel. I'm happy to provide some of these articles. We have discussions going on about this stuff. We've got somewhere in the range of about 145 people or so in that chat. But notice that Rahab is one of the names in the Old Testament of the chaos monster. And there's a couple of other things, and I'm not going to go through the details of all the ins and outs, okay? But Psalm 89 is a really good example of where we see this popping up, okay? So there's a land and a sea chaos monster, two of them in the Old Testament. Now, this is not unique to me. This is not a Mike Colburn's making this up. This is not a, oh, you're going down the rabbit hole too far and you're just crazy. Okay. I've already apparently been kind of referenced that in the chat. I want to show you a few scholars that also take this stance. Okay. What we have here is the famous work that really, if you're wanting to do Old Testament, New Testament work, pick this up, commentary on the New Testament use of the Old Testament. This is like right down the lane of what it is that we're trying to do here, okay? And so this is actually Beale and McDonough, which we've referenced before. And so I just want to read this as kind of the trajectory. I'm not the only one that takes this position. They say this: the depiction of the two beasts in chapter 13, that's of Revelation, is based in part on Job 40 and 41, which is the only place in the Old Testament that portrays two satanic beasts that oppose God. The sea monster of the Job passage also has a companion classified as a land beast, which is called a therion. Both beasts are described with demonic attributes and are said to have been quote, made to be mocked by the angels. That's in the Septuagint of Job 40 and 41. Okay, on the two demonic beings in Job 40, you can also see there's a reference there to another scholar. The two beasts of Job 40 to 41 are echoed throughout Revelation 30. One is called a dragon from the sea, and the land beast is to be slain by God with a sword. The sea dragon conducts a war wage by his mouth and burning torches, and the flame goes out of his mouth. There is nothing upon the earth like him. Okay, so if you're looking for, and again, let me go to the passages here real quick so you can see the reference point for this. Okay, this is Job 40, 19 and 20. It is the first of the great acts of God. Only its maker can approach it with the sword, for the mountains yield food for it. Oh, now, is this in the Septuagint? I want to make sure I'm not reading the Septuagint. Yeah, this is actually, let me actually pull up the Septuagint. Hang on one second. This is not in the, that's not what I wanted. Sorry, guys. Hold on just a second. Original language. Let's get the English. By the way, there's the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. That's a mouthful. Let's do. Where's the? I don't want that. Well, let me do this. Let me do Septuagint, Bible, And let's find the one I want here. Yeah, let's do this version here. Here we go. All right, so let me make sure this is right. Let's go down to, there we go. Now we got it. This is in the Septuagint, okay? And by the way, the reason why this is a little bit different is, remember, the Septuagint is the Greek translation. I'm not using this as a preference. It's a translation, okay? But also understand that some of the verses are not identical from a numbering standpoint. So when I say the Septuagint, Job 40, 19 and 20, it's not identical in numbering as what is found in the normal English translation. Okay. But here's what it says. If a flood should happen, it is taken notice. It trusts that the Jordan shall rush up with its mouth. Shall one take it in its eye, being caught in a snare? Shall one pierce its nose? And will you lead the serpent in by a fish hook? So there's that. Drakon is the actual name, which is the identical Greek word for dragon in Revelation. Okay. Now you get the same thing in 41 verse 24 and 5, or the other referent point. I think that is that right? There is not anything upon the earth like it. Here is like what? Here we go. And it regards the sea as a pot of ointment. It's referring to four-footed beast. Okay, so you can see the referent point for what it is that is being discussed, just so you know kind of where that's located. So, okay, so basically, okay, I want to be very clear on this, that basically this is describing in Job creatures of the deep, and effectively what the author is doing in Job is that he's talking about their effect on the land. And all of this is what would be considered flood language. Okay. When you get to Job 40, verse 20, okay, which we already looked at. This is in the Septuagint. Okay. It reads, and will you lead the serpent in by a fishhook and put a halter around its nose? Well, obviously, the response, this is a rhetorical question, right? Obviously, no, Job, you can't control Leviathan, okay? It's Leviathan. You're no match for it, okay? But if you keep reading in Job 41 in the Septuagint, okay, you're going to find something interesting. Let me go all the way to 41 verses 24 to 25. This is where we were at just a second ago. There is not anything upon the earth like it, being made to be mocked by my angels. It sees everything that is high, and it itself is king of all that is in the waters. So this is really interesting, okay? Because in the Septuagint, you've got this big symbol for chaos, the Leviathan sea beast, which is based on what Job is saying, it's going to be mocked by the angels. Okay. Now I'm going to go back over to just to pick us back up where we were at. Okay. In Beale and McDonough. This is what's being referenced here in the text. Okay. The two beasts that we just read. Okay. The land beast is to be slain by God with a sword. The sea beast conducts a war waged by the mouth, burns torches. Okay. There is nothing upon the earth that is like it. Okay. Let me look at my notes here I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah. So If you go back to Revelation 13 and you pay attention to the text of Revelation 13, this description of the beast as being unique, it's the ultimate beast. This would be primarily understood by John as the ultimate chaos figure. Okay, that would be the ultimate backdrop. Not some of these modern things that you think, oh, it's Rome, or oh, it's it's the papal power, or it's whatever it is that kind of gets posited. For John, this is I believe what's really in the backdrop of his mind. Okay, now let's go back to some of this reading real quick. Jewish tradition held that on the fifth day of creation, God created Leviathan to be in the sea and the Behemoth to dwell on the land. You want to know where to find all of that? You can right there, okay? These two beasts were symbolic of the powers of evil and were to be destroyed at the final judgment, okay? Explicitly in 2nd Baruch, the Midrash, Rabbah, on Leviticus 13:3, and then a couple of other texts, and implicitly in other 3 texts above. Okay, these up above. For further references to the two beasts in later tradition, you can find these details here. Now, the destruction of Rahab and the Leviathan at the final judgment. This is the part you probably haven't heard a lot of this, okay? But this final judgment of the Rahab and Leviathan beasts is what scholars call the Divine Banquet motif, or it's what's called the final Passover. Christians would call it the marriage supper of the Lamb. Trust me, there is going to be lots of hooks, pun intended. Okay. There's going to be a lot of hooks that you're going to see that are hopefully going to fire off in your brain when you start reading what we have in Revelation on this. Okay. This is what would be considered the great eschatological meal with God and his people. So I have to ask a question. Do you know what is actually being served at this meal? I'd love to hear. Do you know what's being served at this meal? I'd love to hear in the chat what you guys think is being served at this particular meal. Is it vegan something? Is it rice cakes? Is it lamb? Is it like what's being served at the marriage supper of the Lamb? What's being served? In Jewish tradition, as I wait to hear some thoughts from you all, okay? In Jewish tradition, the answer, believe it or not, to this supper wasn't the Lord's Supper. In Jewish tradition, the answer would have been we're having Rahab, Behemoth, and Leviathan. That's what's on the table. I don't know if it's filet steak. I don't know how they're cut. I don't know if they're medium, well done. I don't know the details. But that would be the Jewish response. It was a way of expressing the idea that chaos itself is being devoured. It's going to come to an ultimate end. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from a book from, let me see if I can find the link to this book. Where is the link? Well, I might have to do some searching because once again, I didn't put it in the notes. But while I'm doing this, I'm going to read a section from a book that's actually, who's the author? Brant Pitre. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard of that particular scholar. Let me see if I can find. I should have looked at this first. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Now this particular book is going to start. This is Jesus and the Last Supper, but it's a Jewish theme. This is theology that would be based on Jewish theology, and I'm going to start where he's discussing the he's kind of discussing this this image of a banquet, or this divine banquet idea within the Old Testament. Okay. I don't, if you may not have this book, I have, this is called Jesus and the Last Supper. I think it's, I don't think it's cheap. Okay. But some of this research is what's pulled on by Dr. Heiser. If you're familiar, if you get into any of this, but here's what we have. Okay. Multiple passages in the Jewish scriptures use the image of a banquet or feast to describe the joy of the coming age of salvation. However, by far the most illicit description of an eschatological banquet is the Old Testament. In the Old Testament is in the book of Isaiah. In the midst of a series of descriptions of the coming day of the Lord. This is Isaiah 24 to 27, where the prophet speaks of a future banquet with the nations. Now, he's then going to go through in this section, he's going to go through a list of certain features of the banquet, okay? One of the things that he mentions, let me just kind of read. I don't have all of this highlighted, okay? But we're going to start here in this section right here, okay? And actually, I'm going to highlight this. So first, the coming feast is no ordinary feast. It's no ordinary banquet. It is an eschatological event. This eschatological dimension is evident from the fact that the banquet culminates in the overthrow of suffering and death. God will swallow up death forever and wipe away tears from all faces. Indeed, just a few verses after describing the banquet, Isaiah goes on to speak about the resurrection of the bodies and of the dead. And then he says, as Joseph Klausner suggests, the overall context of the banquet is Isaiah's vision of the cessation of death and the resurrection of the dead in the age to come. Secondly, the banquet is a feast of redemption. Lost my place here. It will be tied to the forgiveness of sins. At the time of the banquet, God will take away the reproach of his people and give them salvation. Let's look at the third dimension here. Okay. Now, before I go to the third section real quick, let me just kind of step in here and make a few comments. Basically, the Messiah, the one who is to come, the coming of Jesus in the New Testament, is the first coming. And it was the Messiah, it was a signal that the exile is now ending. But this kind of should be seen, I think, should be seen as an already but not yet thing. Clearly, the Messiah is here, but the ultimate culmination, the ultimate restoration is not truly here yet. The exile isn't completely over until everything comes full circle. And not only God's people, but also because of Jesus Christ, it is the restoration of the Gentiles back into the body of Christ. Okay, so also the nations that are outside of the normal holy ones the Jewish nation, okay, are brought back into the family. There's no longer an exile. They're home. And that's what would be called, once that restoration happens, that would be called the day of the Lord, the final eschatological moment. I'm going to go back to the third section here. Third, the coming feast will be a cultic or sacrificial banquet. Don't think cult when, like the modern day cult stuff, when you see that. This is the meaning of the strange imagery of fat things and the wine of the lees in Isaiah. This is technical terminology for sacrificial offerings of the temple cult, as when Deuteronomy speaks of the fat of their sacrifices and the wine of their drink offerings. This is, and I'll just kind of keep reading here. I'll kind of end. Well, I'm going to keep going down to here as well. This cultic dimension is important to stress since Isaiah explicitly states that the banquet will take place on the mountain of the Lord, which in context refers to Mount Zion or in Jerusalem, okay? Now, here's another reason why the Lord appears. The whole battle of Armageddon, that whole segment, okay? It's Jerusalem. It's Zion. It's not Megiddo. It's Zion. It's the Har Moed, which is the Mount of Assembly. That's the technical term for what we get as Armageddon, okay? Har Moed, which is the Mount of Assembly, the mount where the divine council is. Now, let me just say this as a side note. If you're interested, some of the audience here has no real connection to Adventism. That's totally fine. That's okay. You don't have to listen to this segment, okay? But I am working on a response video that will deal with the Armageddon theology that is posited by the Seventh Adventist Church through a video that was recently posted by Doug Batchelor and Amazing Facts. I will be getting into some of this stuff with regards to that response. I'm just going to leave that there for those of you, so you know what's kind of coming down the pipeline and what I'm working on. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, those of you that have gotten Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm Expanded Edition, you're going to get a lot of this in his research, a lot of it, okay? Let's go back to the fourth item here. Fourth, in Isaiah, the eschatological banquet will be an international banquet, which will include both the restored tribes of Israel and the Gentile nations. The feast will be for all peoples and will result in the veil that is cast over all the nations or Gentiles being lifted. This is a startling universal vision of salvation, nestled right in the heart of one of the most widely read prophets of the Old Testament. Now, pause for a second. I'm going to read the next one here. Don't be too concerned. Some of you might freak out by what was just said, okay? Let's look at the next one. Fifth, and finally, given our focus on chapter 2 on Moses and Mount Sinai, it is significant that several scholars have suggested that the banquet in Isaiah 25 alludes to and is modeled on the heavenly banquet of Moses and the elders atop Mount Sinai. Now, I don't know if you remember that particular banquet. By the way, side note, if you want to do a fascinating study, just do a study of all the different places that God eats with his people. It's a fascinating study, okay? It's an exceptional study. By the way, Slay, yes, it is Doug Batchelor and Amazing Fraud. That is, we're renaming all kinds of things like ADL, Advent Defense League. It's actually Always Defending Law, or something like always defending. I don't know what. We're just defending. We're just changing things up here. But let's go back to Exodus real quick. Okay. We're going to look at this segment. This is Exodus 24, 9 through 11. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel under his feet. There was something like a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. God did not lay his hand on the chief men of the Israelites. They beheld God, and they ate and drank. Okay. So this is, they go up to the mountain. They see the God of Israel. They see Yahweh, at least I don't know how you want to describe it, not in his fullness, but they see the God of Israel. They have a meal with the God of Israel. And now other banquet texts that you see in Scripture that get this motif of eating, okay, that gets into this concept, okay, is where this is potentially coming from. Okay. Isaiah 55, Isaiah 62, Isaiah 65, Zechariah 9, Zechariah 16 and 17. This is not just a small thing, okay? This is a very common motif. It's not a little theme. It's a very large vein of very weighty theology in Jewish history, okay? It's not just one passage. It's a major thing, okay? You've got a number of places that talk about this particular thing. Now, if we go back to, let me find, there it is, Jesus and the Lord's Supper. Okay, I'm going to find, where did he reference the next section? Well, here's what happens when you don't highlight things and hyperlink them. It is not as easy to find. So we're going to actually find these on the fly. I'm just going to let you guys see what happens. Okay. I'm searching for a quote. There it is. All right. There we go. Perhaps the most elaborate description of the Messianic banquet comes to us from 2nd Baruch. Okay. Again, this is 2nd Baruch is it's Second Temple Jewish literature. It's pseudepigraphical literature in this case. Pseudo just means it's written by someone that, it's not written by Baruch. Okay. It would be similar to what we would call like a ghost writer today. It doesn't mean it's false. That's a fairly common misunderstanding. It just means it's kind of ghost written. We don't really know who wrote the literature. Now, back to the text, which is commonly dated to the late 1st century. Although the text is long, it's worth quoting in full. And he goes on, as it perhaps is the most full-blown expectation of the Messianic feast, period. Now, this is a long quote. Okay, I'm going to actually read through some of it. If you want details of this, obviously join the Discord chat. It's been in the corner, hopefully, a couple of times, okay? Here's what it says. This is actually 2nd Baruch 29 through 29, verse 1 through 30, verse 4. And it will happen that when all that which should come to pass in these parts has been accomplished, the Messiah will begin to be revealed. And Behemoth will reveal itself from its place, and Leviathan will come from the sea, the two great monsters which I created on the 5th day of creation, and which I shall have kept until that time. And they will be nourishment for all who are left. The earth will also yield fruits 10,000-fold, and on one vine will be 1,000 branches, and one branch will produce 1,000 clusters, and one cluster will produce 1,000 grapes, and one grape will produce a core of wine. Interesting. By the way, that's not grape juice. And those who are hungry will enter themselves, and they will And they will, moreover, see marvels every day. 4 winds will go out in front of me every morning to bring the fragrance of aromatic fruits, and clouds to the end of day to distill the dew of health. It will happen at that time that the treasury of manna will come down again from on high, and they will eat of it in those days, because these are they who will have arrived at the consummation of time. And it will happen after these things, when the time of the appearance of the Anointed One has been fulfilled and he returns with glory, that then all who sleep in hope of him will arise. And it will happen at that time that those treasuries will be opened in which the number of the souls of the righteous were kept. And they will go out, and the multitudes of the souls will appear together in one assemblage of one mind. And the first ones will enjoy themselves, and the last ones will not be sad. For they know that the time has come of which it is said that it is the end of times. Now, that should bring some connection, okay, to what we're talking about. I want to pick up with what Pitre continues to kind of chime in on. I know we're getting close to the end of this segment. We're going to have a part 2 where we're going to go through. There's a lot more of stuff to cover here. Several aspects of this grand vision are worth highlighting. And then Petre's going to chime in here. Okay. First, the banquet is both eschatological and explicitly messianic, directly tied both to the coming of the Anointed One and the end times. Secondly, it is important to stress that eating in the Messianic age takes place not on a single occasion, but every day. Hence, the Messianic banquet not only marks the beginning of the eschatological age, but it is the future. But it is a feature of it in perpetuity. Third, the banquet is described in terms evocative of the exodus from Egypt. Its commencement will be marked by the return of the manna from heaven. It will take place alongside the return of the heavenly dew that brought the manna in the first place. Even the image of superabundant wine and enormous clusters of grapes harkens back to the gathering of the grapes in the land of Canaan by the emissaries of Joshua at the end of the Exodus. Fourth, the quite memorable and the righteous can also expect to eat or feed on the flesh of the Leviathan and Behemoth. It is not quite clear whether this imagery is hyperbolic, figurative, or is intended to be as literal description of the viands of the banquet. Either way, it seems to represent the triumph of the righteous over the destructive power of this world. Lastly, but by no means least significant, the inauguration of the Messianic banquet directly precedes the return of the Messiah to heaven and the resurrection of the righteous dead. Praise the Lord. So the Messiah comes. He goes back to heaven. Again, this is the Jewish portrait. Okay, this is the Jewish portrait of this messianic feast. Okay, so for a Christian in the book of Revelation, you would say the Messiah returns, is what you would say. Okay, then heaven returns to earth, and we see this transition from the return of the Messiah on into the new heavens and the new earth. Okay, it all fits in this beautiful picture of what is going on. Now, he's going to go on and say, okay, the banquet begins to be celebrated on earth during the days of the Messiah. It finds this ultimate fulfillment in the return of the pre-existent Messiah. There's that already but not yet kind of theme in Judaism, okay? Apparently along with the resurrection of the righteous to heaven. So this is common in Christian theology as well. That heaven, okay, where we're some people think where we're going to be, okay, it's not the new earth. I actually believe it is the new earth. Okay, that's what I believe, that heaven comes to earth. We don't go to heaven. Heaven comes to earth. But this is a very common way to have heaven be some sort of this non-earth ethereal existence. And of course, that never really answers the question, well, what happens to the new earth then? Is it empty? But maybe you guys don't think about that stuff, okay? I don't want to drift off into that too much. Now, here's what we're going to do. We are going to end the conversation here because we're going to get back into what Pitre has to say. I don't know if it's Pitre or Pitre has to say, but this is the backdrop that I firmly believe is a much better backdrop than maybe the traditional. Now, doesn't mean you can't have the traditional, because remember in the beginning, what did I say? That both these trajectories have some speculation to it, both of them. Okay, so maybe they're both in view, but I love the imagery from the Jewish backdrop that would be prevalent in the mind of John as he is writing Revelation. So maybe go back and read Job 40, 41, read it in the Septuagint, read 2nd Baruch. You got a lot of stuff that you can do between now and the next conversation, because we will pick it back up with Pitre. We'll kind of further our conversation on Leviathan, Rahab, Leviathan, Behemoth. We'll further that discussion. But for now, I really hope that this gives you a good framework to begin to see in Revelation 13 what the imagery is kind of portraying. I really think this has very strong theological interpretive skill that kind of brings to the table. So, friends, I hope you enjoyed this exciting conversation. We'll be doing part 2 next. Okay. Hopefully we'll have enough time to get through all of the next segment of Revelation 13. If you're interested and wanting to study more, scan that QR code up in whichever corner it is on your screen, the upper right-hand corner. Join the Discord chat. We would love to have you study with us. We have an incredibly good study on Friday mornings that happens inside of Discord. Don't forget, please don't forget, we have this coming up. Don't forget, Tuesday of next week, we will have Anthony Delgado. If you have the time, pick up his book. It's an easy read. The gospel is bigger than you think. You'll understand why the image of that kid is there and why Christ is at the center of this, all of this stuff that's going on. The gospel is bigger than you think. It is incredibly beautiful, and yet even a child can understand it. So excited to have that conversation. Well, friends, it was fun. It was enjoyable. Thank you so much for the discussion together. Looking forward to the next one. Keep it real, study deep, and we'll see you on the next one, okay? God bless.